I started writing the introduction of my book on June 25th and finished exactly 4 months later on October 25th, which means I am right on schedule. And because October had 5 weeks, I was able to use that last week rereading my draft and making my initial revision edits. So over the course of these 4 months, I spent 105 hours and 45 minutes writing a total of 9,465 words. That means I averaged about 90 words an hour and wrote an average of an hour a day, Monday through Friday. My final paragraph count ended up being 27 paragraphs, with my shortest paragraph being 167 words. And my longest paragraph was 798 words. But on average, my paragraph length ranged from 300 to about 400 words. And all of this is pretty consistent with what I had mapped out in my How Do I Plan to Write My Nonfiction Book in 30 Months video, which if you haven't seen, I will make sure to link it in the description box below. With the completion of my intro, I am now 1/7 of the way towards completing a full draft of my academic monograph. As academics, we're actually not taught how to write an academic monograph, so I'm going to briefly share how I went about writing my introduction. What I did was map out 6 introductions of academic monographs that not only share my research interest, but books that I really enjoyed reading, either because of the prose or the author's voice or even the argument structure. And the books that I used include Embodied Avatars by Yuri McMillan, Digital Black Feminisms by Catherine Steele, Blasian Invasion by Myra Washington, By Black by Aria Holiday, as well as Shine by Krista Thompson, and Between Good and Ghetto by Nikki Jones. When mapping out each book, I looked to see how long each introduction was and then cross-listed that information with the book's publication date. And the correlation I made was that books that were published 5+ years ago tended to have longer introductions, while books that were published in the past 5 years had slightly shorter introductions. And by shorter introduction, I mean an intro that is less than 10,000 words, and that ranges to about 20 pages single-spaced. I then counted the amount of paragraphs that were in those 20-ish pages and counted around 20 to 30-ish paragraphs. So that's why in my planning video, I decided that my introduction would be about 10,000 words with 25-ish paragraphs. From there, I then looked to see how many section breaks each author used within those 20-ish pages. And there were about 4 to 6 section breaks. And I noticed that most authors used a section break to delineate the chapter overview at the end of the introduction. So then I planned for my last section break to also be my chapter overview, and that would have about 6 paragraphs because my monograph is 5 body chapters and a conclusion. So 25 paragraphs minus my 6 paragraphs for that chapter overview would then give me 19 paragraphs between 4 to 6 section breaks. In that first section break, 5 out of the 6 authors that I've been using to map out my introduction actually started off that first section either with an autoethnographic narrative or an ethnographic narrative, which I feel is pretty standard for the humanities. So I decided to map out the first section of my introduction with an autoethnographic narrative about my early memories of representations of Black girlhood on television sitcoms like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Sister Sister, and Family Matters. From there, I spiraled into the intellectual trajectory of the book. So my first section ended up being 13 paragraphs long. My second section is 6 paragraphs long, and it maps out my methods and my theoretical framework. Then in my third section, which is only 2 paragraphs long, I added a short literature review. Then in my fourth section, which is only 3 paragraphs long, I explain why I start my research in the 1950s, and then pinpoint the Brown versus Board of Education case result as my starting point. Then in my 5th section, which is my chapter overview, I only ended up writing 4 paragraphs because I ended up collapsing some of the explanation of my chapters into the same paragraph. So all of this ended up making up the 27 paragraph structure of my introduction. And actually, by the time you are watching this video, I will have already started drafting the first body chapter, which I have in my schedule should be done by the end of February. And of course, I will make sure to report back then. As always, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.